Since the dawn of the 21st century, scientific discovery has rushed forward at lightning speed. Genetics, physics, computerized technology, robotics, virtual reality. Join Derek and Sharon Gilbert as they uncover the truths behind this ultimate scientific deception. Welcome to SciFriday.
We can talk.
Ready your phasers. It's time for... Welcome to SciFriday. I'm Derek Gilbert.
I'm Sharon Gilbert, and we're getting really goofy because this is the third program we've recorded today. And you know what? We don't have anybody to help us. You just get to sit out there and decide how crazy we are.
That's right. We're just hopped up on coffee and ready to roll here. Well,
Yes.
Thank you for joining us. Please take a moment, if you haven't already, and download our free mobile app. The app is not just mobile, it's also for Roku or Apple TV. But if you use that, if you're watching this on YouTube, God bless you.
Thank
click
you.
the button to subscribe, click the button for notifications, share it around with your friends and family. But as a backup, please make sure you got the mobile app, because there's no telling when the gatekeepers of big tech might just decide we've said something unapproved. They've done that to us before.
And you don't know from day to day what is and isn't approved. so-
Sometimes they've done this before. They go back through our archives like a year and a half. It's like, you said something back then. Strike. Well, bypass all of that. Get our app. It is for iOS, Android, Amazon Kindle Fire phones and tablets, Roku, Apple TV. If you've got a relatively recent smart TV, like the one that's on a shelf behind us here, you can cast it with Chromecast, Google's Chromecast or Apple's AirPlay from your mobile device right to your TV with no wires, so you don't need to sit and watch on a teeny little screen. So
we do that all the time with stuff that we can't get through an app that's actually on the smart TV. For instance, if you want to watch the Skywatch TV virtual conference, which begins this is playing in
this
November.
month,
You would have 90 days to watch that from November 4th.
from November 4th.
And you can AirPlay it or Chromecast it to your smart TV and watch it on the big old screen. Who doesn't want to see Tom Horn on the big old
Absolutely, yeah. Tom Horn's new documentary. It will be a new documentary by the time Josh Peck gets done with it.
Oh, my.
But again, you can do the same thing with SciFriday, Unraveling Revelation, our weekly Bible study, my weekly podcast, using our app available at gilberthouse.org/app or scifriday.tv/app.
I know, it's crazy. We're all over the place. Today we're going to talk about something that I think it really surprised me when I saw this story this morning. And as you're watching this, the story is probably a few weeks old, but it is an opinion piece at Gatestone Institute. Now, this is a very highly respected policy council that when you see an article here, I sit up and take notice. This is written by someone who understands China, understands the geopolitics of what's going on presently. And frankly, from day to day, Xi was just inaugurated, anointed the third time. He's too old, according to the Communist Party there.
Right.
He shouldn't be in that office, and yet he is. He's surrounded himself with yes men. So, in fact, a previous president was ushered out.
Yeah, Hu Jintao, who is 79 and looking rather frail and feeble, did not look like he wanted to go.
He did not.
With the nice men who'd been there to kindly assist him out the door.
Yeah, there's a lot of stuff going on that I'm sure that we don't even know, because frankly, they try to keep a lot of stuff from the Western press. But this piece, it's titled, "China Can Sneak Attack Taiwan." Now, I'm going to explain the sneak attack in a minute, but why do we need to care about Taiwan?
I think our main reason for caring about Taiwan is simply this idea among Western elites that we are the big dog and everybody has to do what we want. Quite frankly, and I know this is probably not a popular view to take, when it comes to Taiwan and China, when it comes to Ukraine and Russia, frankly, they are in those larger nations, Russia and China's spheres of influence. They are not in the United States' sphere of influence.
No.
We would react to China interfering in Mexico the way China reacts to us supporting Taiwan.
Oh, absolutely.
And so Taiwan, there is a a sense of pride and honor among Eastern cultures, Asian cultures, Southeast Asian cultures, regarding loss of face that we in the West don't really understand well. And for China, it is a matter of national honor to recover Taiwan. Now, we don't want the Taiwanese people to live under a dictatorship, under totalitarian rule, any more than we would want to live under totalitarian rule. But
No.
the fact is this: when our military runs war games with to tabletop what would happen if China decided to invade Taiwan. I just read the most recent series of exercises conducted over the summer of 2022. The team playing the Chinese side was not always able to take Taiwan. The team representing the American side was able to hold them off, but that was by pre-deploying U.S. Marines to Taiwan before China invaded. And then there was a huge loss of life on both sides. So are we willing to get involved in a war against China? China is nearly the equal of the United States military now. We've got more advanced weapon systems, but China's getting close. China just has the advantage in terms of raw numbers, and they don't have a supply line issue like we would have fighting on the other side of the planet.
Right. Let me also add that the South China Sea is in that region, and there is a strait that goes past Taiwan, between China and Taiwan, that a lot of international ships use. Also, the United States has started stockpiling war material on Taiwan in preparation for something. At the same time, our current administration has claimed that we believe in the one China policy. That means that Taiwan is part of China. And yet, we have moved a lot of our chip industry and tech industry to Taiwan, in addition to sending all sorts of war material in preparation for something.
Yeah, and that can't be understated. The fact that Taiwan is the world's number one manufacturer of computer chips is huge.
And they're not doing that in China presently because of the lockdowns.
No.
There are certain regions that had been centers of tech production.
But there was a story that was out just a couple of months ago that China, one of China's domestic chip producers, has finally been able to achieve a level, and I think I'm going to forget the number here, like 13 nanometer chip production, which is better than anything that we can do here in the United States. The closest that our chip makers have come is like 16 nanometer. And that's relevant because the amount of distance that the signals have to travel inside the chip to process information makes a difference. The less distance they have to travel. In other words, if you make smaller transistors, smaller chips, you can process things much faster, which is very important for a couple of things. Number one, of course, is military processing. If your computer can come up with a firing solution for the incoming missile faster than the missile can adjust its trajectory, then you're in better shape than if your computer is a little slow in being able to track and target the incoming missile or airplane or what have you.
And since you're mentioning missiles, China has a hypersonic missile. We do not.
Yeah.
Russia has a hypersonic missile. We do not.
Yeah, and that's something that we Americans, since World War II, have got this idea that our military is darn near invulnerable. And it is the greatest military on planet Earth. And I'm not disparaging our military.
No, it's amazing.
And especially those who have volunteered to serve. God bless you for your service. But the fact remains that we are behind in some areas that military planners and strategists will always look for ways to get around another nation's advantages. And this goes back to Sun Tzu, the ancient Chinese warlord from 6th century BC, 7th, whatever. Any inherent advantage that one side possesses an inherent disadvantage. For example, in World War II, when the French built their Maginot Line, which is their impenetrable wall of fortresses separating France and Germany, the advantage of that was that the Germans would never be able to break through that line. These big concrete bunkers with big guns, a great advantage defensively. The disadvantage is that you can't move them, and the Germans just went around through Belgium. The same thing happened in Gulf War I, where we were told by our media that General Norman Schwarzkopf was going to have a very difficult time because the Iraqis had this defensive fortification. World War II, the Maginot Line. And of course, that's what General Schwarzkopf did. Our tanks just went around Iraq's defensive lines. So the aircraft carriers that the United States possesses, which gives us the ability to project air power all over the world, I have no real defense against these hypersonic missiles.
No,
they are
move
sitting ducks.
So quickly, so quickly. And they can actually reach us.
Yeah. But again, from the standpoint of it basically, the hypersonic missiles neutralizes our aircraft carriers.
Exactly. Now, as believers, and we'll go to a break here in a minute, but as believers, we trust in the Lord to provide for his people. He allows these things to occur according to his plans. So just think about the prophecies that we see in the Old Testament and in the New Testament that indicate in the last days there will be a whole lot of bad stuff. And in our most recent Unraveling Revelation, which I think is next week, you're going to see it, that we talk about those riders that you see in Revelation chapter 6. I think that we've seen a number of indications that they are given permission to ride one last time, and it's going to be a massive push. That includes this article from the Gatestone Institute, which we will talk about finally after this break.
Spiritual warfare is where the rubber meets the road for us as Christians, but often we treat it as though it doesn't really exist. Well, during the month of November, we're tackling this subject head on as we celebrate the release of Sharon's new novel, The Poisoned Pawn, Book 8 in the Red Wing Saga, a series that teaches spiritual warfare through compelling stories featuring characters that you come to know and love. As part of this special package, we're offering the important new book by our friend Vicki Joy Anderson, They Only Come Out at Night, where she looks at the phenomenon of night terrors or sleep paralysis, examines what the medical community says about it, and then digs into the spiritual forces behind it. And the good news, that there is a way to make it stop. We're also offering our 2-disc DVD set, Unmasking the Ancient Gods, a series of presentations on spiritual warfare, everything from the UFO phenomenon to Jack the Ripper and spiritual warfare in the 19th century, which is really where the storyline of the Red Wing Saga begins. Bought separately, this package is worth $65, but it's yours for just $35 plus shipping and handling during the month of November only. Our spiritual warfare special offer, available only at our online store, gilberthouse.org/store. And as always, we thank you for your prayers and your support. Welcome back to SciFriday. I'm Derek Gilbert.
I am Sharon Gilbert, and we get into all sorts of stuff here at Gilbert House, and that includes travel. In 2023, we are going to Israel, and we're going to explore archaeological sites because we are such geeks. And if you are an archaeology geek and you just love Israel, even if you've been there before, our tour is different. So if you're interested, go to gilberthouse.org, gilberthouse.org/travel, and you'll see all of the information for our 2023 activity, and we'd love for you to join us.
Absolutely. We got 2 full buses already, we are told. We may be getting a 3rd bus, which is great. This is a manageable size. There's enough people that you'll be able to find and make new friends, have a great time on the tour, but small enough yet that we can get to these sites on the tour without having to really get almost military with our logistics.
Unlike, our good friend Jonathan Kahn, who takes, 20 buses or something. He takes this gigantic, but he has lots and lots of people helping him. We have just a couple of people helping us when we go over. And if you want to go and see all these sites, including Gilgal Rephaim, the Serpent Mound that is there, we didn't explore that last time.
No.
So lots of things, including some other stuff that are surprises. Just plan on going with us. Join us and get on that 3rd bus before it fills up.
gilberthouse.org/travel.
Well, I promised before we started taking this break that I was finally going to get to the Gatestone article, but we had to set up why Taiwan even matters in the first place.
Yeah, and by the way, just want to correct myself. The nanometers that I was talking about, it's a 3 nanometer chip is what is being... Yeah, and Samsung in Korea has actually started production of these 3 nanometer chips. Taiwan's semiconductor manufacturing company, TSMC, is the world's most advanced chip maker, but Samsung apparently has beat them to the 3 nanometer chips. There is now a goal of trying to get to a 2 nanometer chip by 2025. Again, the whole idea behind this is that the smaller you can make the transistor, the faster you can make your central processing units for your computers, which again is kind of cool when you're doing stuff at home, video editing, whatever, but it's really important for the military.
I think they need to get to teeny weeny, like 1 nanometer,
Yeah.
in order to have mass production of implantable chips. There was just a story that was probably a few weeks ago by the time you're watching this, of a man who had his chip for his bank. His bank card is now in his hand. So Derek was laughing and said, "Can you slide your hand through the slot, please? Can you insert your
it
hand?"
into the chip reader?
Yeah, but the day's coming when it's just a wave.
Yeah.
In fact, there are now units in various countries where it is you just, as you're walking past, it reads your card. Well, that technology is just around the corner. In fact, it may already be here because if it's in the news, it's probably old news.
Yeah.
But the Gatestone article, a sneak attack on Taiwan. What this person is saying is it may not be China suddenly launching missiles or going over with aircraft or taking their submarines or any sort of what appears to be traditional military attacks. It might be a pathogen.
Oh, a targeted bioweapon.
A targeted bioweapon. Now, this person seems to imply, and I've seen stories that these exist, that it is DNA technology driven. China boasts that they have the ability to completely design a bespoke pathogen.
And by bespoke, you mean custom made.
Custom made pathogen for a group of genetically unique individuals. Now, I don't know how unique the people on Taiwan are compared to mainland China, but if you manage to isolate Taiwan so that no one can leave, they can't fly out, they can't take a boat out, they certainly can't drive out because there's no bridge. If you can isolate them that way and put a pathogen in on the island, then you can keep it, theoretically, from going to China or anywhere else in the world.
Well, I just looked this up because that's a really interesting question. The ideal bioweapon or chemical weapon would have a short life so that it doesn't, but according to government figures, more than 95% of Taiwan's population, which is about 23 million people, is Han Chinese, which is the main ethnic population of China.
And that's why I'm saying they would have to isolate that island that no one can take it to mainland China. But mainland China has dealt with a pathogen that is domestic, and they've done it by locking down. People still get sick.
Well, that's the thing.
But the fact is, Xi doesn't really care. He is a dictator. He is not an elected president. He's not a democracy. This is not a democracy.
Right.
This is a dictatorship. So this individual at Gatestone seems to think that may be the sneaky way. You take out your opponent by making them unhealthy. They cannot oppose you because they are just too sick to do it. And the other thing is, why would the United States or any Western country go there if it is essentially an off-limits island because of a disease?
Well, boy, that's a good question. And now I see that the author of the piece is Gordon Chang, who is a Chinese dissident who's an expat living in the United States.
But he's someone who understands the mindset of China.
He does. And the Chinese would not have, I don't think the Chinese Communist Party would have any qualms about doing something like this. They certainly have employed some pretty draconian measures to try to control the coronavirus inside China, which is it's a fool's errand. I mean, trying to control a coronavirus is like, you're trying to stop the common cold by locking people in their homes. It's not going to happen.
Zero case policy.
Yeah, it's nuts.
If one person gets sick, they lock down the whole region.
Yeah, no, that's just not going to happen. But the the will to do something like this might exist. personally, and I'm not a geopolitical
know.
expert, so
We're not.
I think we
need to
would direct you to Lieutenant Colonel Bob McGinnis.
Yes.
I recently interviewed him for my podcast, A View from the Bunker, which, tongue-in-cheek name. I mean, the bunker, we're up here on the hill. They know where we are.
I know.
But you can find that interview about his book, Kings of the East, on my podcast, which is available on our mobile app or our Roku or Apple TV channels. You can just go back a couple of weeks and find that interview. The nice thing about that podcast is that we're not limited to a 28-minute format. So we were able to talk and stretch out for about 45 minutes to discuss what he sees. And of course, the title Kings of the East derives from the book of Revelation and the drying up of the Euphrates River to prepare the way for the kings of the East who come to do battle against Israel, the final battle, Armageddon. Spiritually, supernaturally, the kings of the East, we don't believe, actually represent geopolitical China. There are spirits.
I don't think they're
involved in that war, but yes, the actual kings of the East represented there, I think, are spirit beings
that use humans.
But Colonel McGinnis, as an expert in geopolitics, who is quite familiar, I mean, he's been to North Korea, he's been on the DMZ anyway,
yes,
and is a long student of geopolitics and Bible prophecy, and so he's able to look at this from a worldview that puts both together. He is not does not have any illusions about what the Chinese are up to. They are very clearly trying to influence the rest of the world through what he calls elite capture, which is a nice way of saying of influencing political leaders in other nations. We look at the representative from California, Eric Swalwell, who was dallying with a young Chinese lady named Fang Fang, who had ties with Chinese intelligence.
They support candidates for office.
Right.
And it can be through various blind companies, but they do so.
Through some of their cultural initiatives, like the garden that they very kindly wanted to build in Washington, D.C., that just happened to be on a high point in the city with direct line of sight access to Congress. Great place for a listening post.
Oh, yes. And the 1,000 Talents program that allowed them to affect the intelligentsia, the academics.
Right, to recruit scholars from taxpayer-funded universities in Europe, North America. A number of American scholars have been prosecuted now for taking their positions within our universities and sending that research back to China.
Oh yeah.
But so whether the China will do this, whether Mr. Chang is correct about China using a bioweapon to go after Taiwan or not, I think China wants to reintegrate Taiwan, but because of China's, or rather Taiwan's expertise in making high-end computer chips, I think China would rather do it without losing all of that expertise. They would rather just integrate it politically or economically rather than militarily in destroying the infrastructure and losing access to that expertise.
Now, let me just talk about the possibility of pathogen evolution. And evolution is not a word that I use very often, but we'll say that in the wild, they can mutate and become worse or less virulent, less deadly, more contagious. Well, there is a form of coronavirus, the Omicron form, BA5, I think, is the most recent one, that is highly contagious, but is really not a whole lot worse than a cold in most people. There's a school in Boston that recently...
Boston University,
very highly respected school, that recently took the spike protein from BA5 and put it on the original version of the coronavirus. And they made it highly infectious and deadly.
Yeah, and
that's gain of function research.
That is gain of function research. And what's really interesting is that the company that was at the center of controversy regarding the research at Wuhan Institute of Virology, EcoHealth Alliance, was bragging a couple of months before this news that they'd received a $1 million grant from the National Institute of Allergic and Infectious Diseases, NIAID, headed up by Dr. Anthony Fauci, who's a good friend of Peter Daszak, who runs EcoHealth Alliance. And this $1 million grant was to work with Boston University on researching bat coronaviruses. Oh, what can possibly go wrong? Well, they put this into laboratory mice and found that 80% of them died. The original strain that was circulating in the wild, the alpha strain, that killed 100% of the mice. So we shouldn't panic because it does not have an 80% lethality rate in humans. That original Omicron strain had an infection fatality rate of 0.3%, which is like a...
No, Omicron wasn't the original.
No, I'm saying the original strain that killed 100% of the lab mice had an infection fatality rate of 0.3%, which is like a really, really bad strain of the seasonal flu.
Yeah.
So 80% lethality in the mice. Now, bear in mind, the Omicron strain didn't kill any of the lab mice. So this is deadlier than Omicron, no question about that. But how would it mutate if it got out of the lab?
Right. My point is that there are labs around the world
Still doing this
that
work.
are still doing gain-of-function research, even though there's supposed to be a moratorium on it. So there probably are labs that are not announcing their studies, not bragging about what they've done, and they didn't necessarily get a grant from anybody. They just had someone with money supporting them. The Lord God Almighty will allow a strain of something to run rampant because we see it in Bible prophecy.
Revelation
It
6.
is part of that final sort of co-op amongst the four riders.
Yes.
And Hades, who's the fanboy to Thanatos. You have to watch my presentation on that. But we are very quickly, economically, as far as scientifically, militarily, we geopolitically, we are very quickly moving to that last moment. And I will say, as far as China is concerned, you mentioned North Korea a few minutes ago, or at least Korea. Kim Jong-un, who is the dictator of North Korea, he is treated like a god. Well, a couple of stories that have come out of North Korea recently, one of them being that someone has declared him a target. In other words, he has a ring of people surrounding him because he has announced that someone's trying to kill him. You don't announce that unless there's going to be something happening. You also don't announce that you have a right to preventative launches of a nuclear weapon unless for some reason you plan eventually. It's that old idea in fiction, don't show a gun in the first act if you're not going to use it in the third act. Well, he's announced that he's going to do this. Kim Jong-un and all of the dictators of North Korea have acted as junkyard dogs for China for decades. So if you pay attention to what North Korea is saying and doing, that will help you to understand what China plans in the near future.
Yeah, basically it's a warning to the West that don't think if something breaks out over Taiwan that it's going to be limited to Taiwan, because North Korea may take that as an opportunity to start letting missiles fly.
But don't get panicky.
Right.
Because the Lord is still in control. We are in his hand. Get excited about what he is planning to show us, because this is the end result, the end time of this massive, long spiritual war, and we get to be part of it.
Yes, amen. And that's should be motivation for all of us to share the hope that we have in Jesus Christ with our family members, our friends, our coworkers, and colleagues while we still have the time to do so.
Amen.
Yeah. Thank you for watching. This is SciFriday.
SciFriday is a viewer-supported outreach of Gilbert House Ministries. Follow us online at scifriday.tv and gilberthouse.org. That's where you'll find our weekly Bible study, the Gilbert House Fellowship. We'd love to hear from you. Contact us through our websites or drop us a line at P.O. Box 78, Crane, Missouri 65633.